Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours, with 10% off using code FD10. Follow the links in the description below. Hello and welcome to Furious Driving, and today we are driving the Talbot, Arizona. Not the Talbot, Arizona, the Peugeot 309. This is the car that would have been probably the last Talbot before the brand was evaporated into the Peugeot empire. Of course, that never happened. Talbot was assimilated into Peugeot quicker than intended, and so this is why this particular car, although it does have strong elements of Peugeot, also has a slightly out of kilter look for the rest of the Peugeot family from the early 80s when it appeared. Now this particular one is a GE. The model range was quite extensive, with a GTI at the very top, which a lot of people actually reckon is a better car, whisper it, than the Peugeot 205 GTI, which was the absolute halo model because it shared so many of the same components but had a slightly longer wheelbase, meaning that, well, it just has a bit more stability, a bit more maturity to it. But in GE form, literally everything's been taken out. We'll take a look around the car in a moment, but I'm looking at blanking plates and creaky plastic and not a lot else, but that is very much missing the point of this car. Under the bonnet, we've got the old Simca 1.3 Poissy engine. Poissy? I'm not sure how you pronounce it exactly, but it's been slightly improved and tweaked over previous generations, so it's lost a lot of the old rattly Simca-ness in this particular Talbot. Wow! And it revs very happily indeed. We're hitting 45 miles an hour and it seems quite chirpy and cheerful at the moment. We've got those tiny cross-section tyres and bouncy original suspension. These 145 13-inch tyres are hilarious, limited grip, but enough to make it fun. Oh, the gearbox is a joy to use. It's rubbish and brilliant at the same time. It is sort of a curious mix of being nicely positive, but also a bit of a wobbly strainer because the action is kind of all over the place. Very plasticky, quite rubbery, but once it clicks in, you're there. And so, like a French farmer hooning across the countryside in Provence, you can just stir the gears, go charging through the country lanes, and the car loves it. Typical French car enjoys being thrashed, it really does. This is a really good representation of how this car would have been from new. It's got 43,000 miles on it. It was parked up in 1997 with 41,000 on it and not uncovered from a garage until 2022. So it lived about a decade and a bit and drove very sparingly in that time, and it was dealer maintained as far as we know as well. The steering, no power steering obviously, not really too heavy at all, quite low geared, but it kind of suits it in a way. It feels like proper French motoring, poverty spec, but tough, and it keeps on going and going. The roll and slight understeer is hilarious and alarming at the same time. It feels like we're absolutely belting along, as I say, 45 miles an hour, the needle bouncing like it's on a trampoline. And the pedals are really not too heavy at all either, so it makes an easy car to drive over distance. The Peugeot 309 arrived in 1984 after a turbulent development cycle. In 1967, Chrysler Europe was formed from a takeover of Roots, Simca and Barrieras in Spain. But in 1978 they were sold to PSA, and Chrysler Simca models were then badged as Talbots. However, they played a definite second fiddle to the main French brands. The Talbot Arizona was intended to replace the Talbot Horizon, and by 1982 Project C28, the first new car planned completely under PSA control, was in full swing, being styled at the old Chrysler Roots Whitley Design Studios in Coventry, while the engineering work was being done at the old Simca plant in Poissy in France, but it was underpinned by all new suspension. The rest of the Peugeot range at the time had been designed by Pininfarina, and because of this the Peugeot family look is slightly and almost indefinably wrong. But even before being rebadged, a useful Peugeot instruction from bosses, very much like the one that gave the Tagora a slightly too narrow rear axle from a 505, made the shift to Peugeot easier, as they'd insisted the parts bin be rated as heavily as possible. So really it was very much a big 205, using a stretched 205 floor pan and even 205 doors. Squint and you really can see it.
This may sound strange, but it's something that Peugeot had done successfully with the 304 and 604 having doors from the 204 and 504. But it wasn't an easy task, and that signature wraparound tailgate glass came about as an elegant solution to a difficult styling problem. Under the bonnet they first used Simca 1118 and 1294cc engines and the gearboxes from the Horizon. These stayed in production until 1991, and they were joined along the way by the Peugeot 1580 and 1905cc XU motors, while Spanish-built cars got the 1442cc and 1592cc Y2 and J2 Poissy engines instead of the 1580. And there were diesels too along the way. From 1986 to PSA, XUD was fitted as an option. Oh, did I mention these were built in Spain? No, well they were, as well as France from 1984 and Ryton in England from 1985. They were built in Villaverde in Spain and also Chile and also India. Another oddity about the 309 was its name. The number hadn't been planned to replace the 305. The 306 was still nearly a decade away in 1993, and it was a slightly different size and significantly the first Peugeot hatchback in this size category. But as Talbot had been gradually phasing out during the early to mid-1980s, it was transferred into the Peugeot stable and the Horizon was left to wither. They'd also been considering a Talbot Super Mini based on the AX, but PSA decided that that and the 205 would be more than enough, thank you. Reaction was mixed when new. Critics felt it looked dumpy compared to the sleek Pininfarina range, but it sold well as it was roomy, comfortable, drove well, especially in GTA form, and it paved the way for Peugeot hatchbacks going from strength to strength over the coming decades. Quite a legacy for Talbot.
Right, let's pull over and have a look around the outside and the interior of this car. So, the first and most interesting, possibly, feature about the 309 is the fact it uses the doors from a 205. They had to make this design fit around the existing doors. A similar thing happened over a Rover, similar kind of time, with the Maestro and the Montego, which is why they've got some slightly weird roof lines as well. Also at the front, it's got the family resemblance with this Peugeot family grille, of course, and the Peugeot family lights, which are again Peugeot 205 actual lights. Who knew? Now around the back of the car there's a few more notable things. Obviously the family look continues with this slatted grille thing, which is ever so popular in the 1980s. Ford lights look very much the same. But look at the rest of the Peugeot range. They've got the same slatted black plastic in between the lights, and these are unique to the car tail lights on the 309. And I do apologise about the lawnmower. He wasn't here when I started, and I've got a cup of tea now, so I'm not leaving it. And a couple of things you'll notice on the back of the car, besides the fact it's got the original Peugeot Talbot Motorhaven dealer sticker and number plate, is this is a GE, which is right at the bottom of the range. But first of all, this big rubber trim around the window indicates that it goes up, and the window goes up with the tailgate, because it's a full-on hatchback with the strongest struts you've ever seen. I think perhaps there were heavier booted versions on higher spec ones with maybe a spoiler, and certainly unlike this one, a rear wash wipe. The GE had the wash wipe deleted and a little plastic blanking plate popped in there because basic. But open up that boot and step inside, and I will say the brochures did make a big deal of this wraparound window, saying improved visibility and airiness and lightness of the car. One thing I didn't mention though is as you open the boot lid, there's a strip of carpet which is attached to the tailgate itself, which interfaces, it meets up and overlaps the luggage load space cover, so you have a complete carpeted area through the glass when you look in, and it is a vast boot. There's not a lot in here. Let me bring you closer. It is a vast, absolutely vast space in here, so a ton of room for luggage. This is your archetypal French car, because zero frills, 100% practicality. Just a hard-wearing vinyl floor mat, nothing on the sides or the back. This is exactly as this car came. Incidentally, the owner does have one incredible accessory, which is possibly the world's only surviving Peugeot Talbot dealer seat cover, probably from when the car was delivered. Climbing aboard, and the base speckery continues. It's surprising how light these doors feel, but again, Peugeot 205, so we've got lots of exposed metal. We have got a vinyl panel in the centre, sort of soft touch, plastic door pull, manual winder, single speaker in each door, little door pull, and actually quite a practical door pocket in there. But climbing inside, we have got, well, nothing really. Some quite comfortable seats actually, with interesting check plaid pattern. Climb inside, not bad space inside here at all, to be honest. But you'll notice things have been deleted. Things have been taken away to emphasize how poor you have been in your choice. So, up top in front of the passenger we do have, as well as a dual air vent, one fixed on the side window and one movable. Ooh, that pivots in an interesting way. Big area, plenty of room for gitanes for easy access, but below that we have got the glove box. But because we're in a GE, there's no door on the glove box. It is literally just a big open space where you can dump stuff. Moving back across, we have this Aztec pyramid shape design, which is the structure of the dashboard, very similar to other Peugeots of the 1980s, and you can sort of see the Peugeot 205 family resemblance here. But we've got a dummy grille at the top, which does literally nothing. We've got a pair of adjustable vents just there, which are actually quite manoeuvrable, and I rather like how the vent pattern is moulded into the sides to give it a full-on 1980s leisure centre feel and appearance. And that is mirrored over here on the right hand side of the dashboard. Again, no extras, no cubbies, no buttons, no nothing, just this. And you can see it is a clip-in panel, so they can change this by model, so higher spec cars could have had other things. What we have got here is a pair of blanking plates, so front fogs, rear wiper perhaps could have been just there, but there's nothing just here. And likewise, back in the centre of the car, we've got the essentials. We've got hazard lights, we've got rear fogs, rear screen heater, and then nothing, just plastic dimples in these little recessed tiny wine bottle areas. In fact, they do look just like the bottoms of wine bottles. I mean, certainly definitely is a French car. Underneath that, no air conditioning, just basic heating and ventilation. I love the way these whirl around. I don't know if they're planning on selling these to a lot of very cold countries though, because the heating gauge is entirely red, just a tiny bit of blue. The rest of it is just heat. Underneath that very large ashtray door, or actually a very small ashtray, and content deletion continues because the 12-volt socket, the lighter socket, is a blanking plate. That's been taken away. Beneath which is a radio, believe it or not. Though I suspect this was either dealer fit or aftermarket, and I think this would have been a blanking plate from the factory, because this doesn't look like a Peugeot radio to me. Oh, it's a Philips, it is a Philips, but it just doesn't have the factory look to it. Moving back up to the main dashboard, we'll scoot past this choke, which is an interesting shape for a choke. It's a long lever, effectively. Up to the dashboard, we've got oil, which is just a light. We've got the fuel gauge, a speedometer, a bunch of warning lights, temperature, and a warning light for water temperature, I guess. Now, while some cars, when you get decontenting and they'll stick a clock instead of a rev counter, we've decontented past that point, so we don't even have a clock. We don't even have a picture of a clock. We've just got the company logo just laughing at you. That lion's not roaring, it's laughing. Underneath that we have yet more storage, because let's face it, storage is free. They can give you that and pretend they've given it a feature. On the left hand side we've got our indicators, lights, well, that rotates in an interesting manner, and our horn. Oh, that's a partially decontented parp. On the right hand side we've got our wipers, which don't rotate, and we've got quite a thin, hard, plasticky steering wheel with the Lion logo also having a bit of a giggle in the centre just there. Underneath we've got the 3 pedals because we're in a proper gearbox. There's no bass section to the centre console. A small cubby just down there. 5-speed gearbox though. They weren't cheaping out on the gearbox though. Proper 5-speed manual, proper handbrake, and a ton of headroom. We do even get an interior light, and what looks to me like a dealer fit or aftermarket sunroof. Again, I don't believe a pop-up sunroof would have been a factory option. Now climbing in the back, except no central locking. Climbing in the back, the front door is very much like the rear door in so much as that everything's the same, apart from the lack of a loudspeaker and a door bin. But climb aboard and we have actually got quite a generous amount of foot and legroom, and headroom feels a smidge tight, but not too bad in fairness. It's not a bad area really. Now, you don't have headrests, but you do have 3 seat belts. And we've got a lot of space for storage in the back. The car isn't without idiosyncrasies, of course. It's a 40-something-year-old French everyday saloon or hatch that's lived a life. The engine has a certain oily fragrance when you walk around the car, which I think is pretty much standard for these things. And it has a slight issue restarting from warm. And it actually says in the handbook, when you're trying to restart the car with a warm engine, start it with your foot flat down on the accelerator in order to start it, which is not something you expect to see these days. Inside it is a beautiful piece of mid-1980s industrial design. It's very clean, lots of those little touches that just mark it out as the 1980s. Long straight edges, big curves, lots of grey plastic, and very clear iconography, not typography, but iconography on all of the dials and things. Now, being a D-Reg, this is a relatively early model. So as well as lacking lots of buttons, this is lacking lots of the upgrades and changes that were made to later cars. This is about as pure a Peugeot 309 as you can ever wish to come across. And it's a delightful. This is one of those cars that will just go on forever. It really is. And I've just noticed it even has a Motorhaven tax disc holder in the window. Wow. If I'm looking for things to complain about, the steering wheel is a little bit spindly and it is very hard indeed, so it is kind of a little awkward to get your fingers around to grip it firmly, and you do want to be gripping it fairly firmly to haul it through the corners. As I say, no power steering in this thing. But 145/13 tyres don't take a lot of hauling, in all fairness. So this is the early version of the Peugeot 309. If you've enjoyed this video, then please, as always, hit like and subscribe, and join us again next time driving something completely different.